Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. My name is Brianna and this is For Pause in a Book. I make book and lifestyle related content, so if that's something that you're interested in, make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below. Today we're going to be talking about all of the books that I read in the month of July. So July was a really good month in terms of how much I read. However, once again, the quality of it, not as great. I say that with the caveat of I did find some really good books that I really loved. I just also have a 1 star on here. So the average rating is not as great. I did have 3 5-stars, which is good because in June I didn't have any 5 stars. So maybe we're back on track there. I read 18 books in the month of July. I also DNF'd another book for a total page count of 6,077 pages, which is more than I've ever read, probably in the history of my reading, specifically online, especially since I've been tracking these things. This was a great month in terms of how much I read and books that I got off of my TBR, things like that. In terms of genres, I read 1 graphic novel, 2 horror books, 1 mystery, 2 paranormal, 2 sci-fi, 1 thriller, and 9 romances. A lot of that was for my Goodreads romance video, which I will reference quite often today. I'll have it linked up in the cards and down below. You should definitely go check it out. It's one of the videos that I am the most proud of. Please don't let it flop. Because of that, I also listened to 12 audiobooks. I had 2 ebooks and 4 physical books. I'm not surprised by that, even though it's a lot higher than I normally read, but because of this romance project that I was doing, I was trying to get through a lot of books for this, so because of that I was doing a lot of them on audio. I had them on Scribd, but may not have actually owned them. That being said, because of the romance video, again, 17 of these books were targeted as an adult audience. Only 1 of them was targeted at a YA audience. I didn't have any middle grade or children's. Most everything was adult this time. Between the romance video and then Summerween, which I read a lot of like adult thriller horror books, I'm definitely trending more in the adult age range for sure. As far as the author status, I read 2 debut novels. I read 6 from authors that I have read before, and 10 were new to me authors. Again, because of Summerween, which I read a lot of thrillers and horrors, which is not a genre I'm really that well versed in. And there were some new authors that I found through this romance video, so I'm really excited about that. I definitely might have bought some of the backlist of some of the authors. It's fine, don't worry about it. Here's where we're going to talk about ratings. Here's where it gets fun. My average rating was a 3.44, which is the lowest rated month of the year. Like I said, I had 1 DNF. That doesn't really take into consideration when I'm talking about my ratings. And then I had 1 1-star. Didn't even deserve that extra half star. 0 1.5, 1 2-star, 2 2.5 stars, 5 3 stars, 2 3.5 stars, 2 4 stars, 2 4.5 stars, and 3 5 stars. So like very much across the board in terms of ratings and how I like the books this month. Normally I do a mid-month wrap-up where I talk about the books that I've read in the first half of the month. However, I didn't do that this month because at the beginning of the month, the majority of the books that I had read were for this romance video and I didn't want to spoil that video. So I didn't do a mid-month wrap-up. So because of that, we're going to have a lot to talk about today. So strap in. It's going to be a long one. Maybe go get yourself a drink. With my end of the month wrap-ups, I always do these in the order that I liked them, from my worst book to my favorite book of the month. So we will start with my DNF, and that was The Locked Door by Freda Mcfadden. This was the group book for the late night crew. It was a thriller on Kindle Unlimited, and it wasn't good. The writing was just very mediocre, and I happened to be reading A Flicker in the Dark, which I'll talk about here in a bit, that had very similar tropes. I was reading them at the same time, and that one was doing it much better. So we DNF'd it, and then I heard some spoilers about this one that like would have made me throw my Kindle across the room, let's be honest. So because of that, I'm really glad that I DNF'd it. Maybe I will read more from this author in the future. I don't know. But this one wasn't it. It is essentially about the daughter of a serial killer. The father has gone away like to prison, and then the crimes start happening again, and so she is actually suspected of the crime itself. Pretty mediocre plotline. The characters just weren't that great, and the writing was very repetitive. Like, the same thing happened multiple times. Like, the same scene happened more than once, and I just didn't love it. So we just DNF'd it and we were done. My 1-star read I did talk about pretty in depth during my summer ween vlog, so I'll link it up there. But if you haven't seen my vlog or you don't watch my vlogs, you just watch my wrap-ups, that's perfectly fine. Let's talk about it now. That was The Haunting by Hope Tarr. This was a paranormal romance with the ghost of a Civil War soldier and this woman. Essentially, this woman buys this house. It's an old plantation house, and she has this boyfriend who's a complete jackass. He does not help with the move. He's not helpful. He's not supportive at all. So she meets this ghost of the Civil War soldier, and it starts a relationship with him. So there is like this cheating aspect, even though, like, yeah, he is a jackass. But there is a cheating element to it. And then as we go along, it gets just weirder and weirder and just wrong. Eventually, the ghost is like, oh, I've been watching you since you were a little girl. And that's creepy and weird. We don't like that. It's weirdly homophobic for no reason. It was just not a good time at all. If you want my live in-depth thoughts about it, check out my vlog. I have kind of blocked it out of my memory. We're not going to talk about it again until the end of the year when we do my worst books of the year, because that one will definitely be on it for sure. Moving on to my 2-star reads, that was Not Your Average Guy by Gwenda Bond. I read this for the video on trying to match books to TV shows. I was trying to find a book that was similar to the TV show Lucifer. Didn't quite hit the mark there. This is about a woman who runs an escape room, and while she is hosting one of the parties, there is a group of like satanic ritualists that come in and do this sacrifice thing. They think that one of the books that's a prop for this escape room is actually like the real thing, a real grimoire, and like does this whole sacrifice. Summons the son of Lucifer. And at that point it was kind of interesting, right? I was kind of on board with it. I kind of liked the main character, and it was fun. But then we went off the rails, and we went into like this whole battle between heaven and hell, and like they go down into hell, and it's just weird. And it I don't know, I got lost after the 50% mark. Like, it definitely didn't follow the pace of a normal romance. And yeah, I at that point got really lost. It was a very quick read. I read it in like 2 days, but I didn't love it. I had 2.5-star reads. The first one was One Night on the Island by Josie Silver. This is one of the books that I read for the Goodreads romance video, so I'll link that up above. Like I said, not going to talk in depth about a lot of these books. Parts of it I really, really liked, and then parts of it I didn't like that much. I really liked the atmosphere, the setting. It was like this tiny little island in Ireland, and you could feel how cold it was. You could feel the wind, and like that whole setting was just really great. My problem was that Cleo was like really whiny and kind of pretentious in this way of like, she just expected everyone to kind of like move out of her way, and so that she could have what she wanted. And I don't love characters like that, especially ones that are like 30 years old, right? Like at that point, be an adult. You understand that the world doesn't revolve around you. And then Mac, I think that's his name, yep. Mac is married. Well, he's separated from his wife, but he acts married. But then he sleeps with her. It's like it's a thing. I don't know. It wasn't my favorite. I didn't love it. But I have more in-depth thoughts in that video. My other 2.5-star read is the one that's probably going to hurt people, and that is Weather Girl by Rachel Lynn Solomon. I think that a lot of people really love this book, and I could totally see why. I definitely think that there's some pretty good mental health representation in here, specifically about depression, if it resonates with you. It didn't really resonate with me, and so I didn't really relate to it. But I totally understand if you do relate to it, you're going to love this book. This is another one that I read for the romance video, and I definitely talked in depth about my problems with this book. One being that it's a single POV romance, but the main love interest, Russ, don't even remember his name because we didn't get a POV from him. And he was such an interesting layered character, but we didn't really know about him unless he was talking to Ari. I read a lot of romance books. I don't remember their names. That being said, 2.5 stars. I definitely understand why people really love this one. It just didn't hit with me. I had 5 3-star reads this month, so that's definitely a contributing factor to the average feeling that this month had in terms of like how my books were rated. I talked about 2 of them in my Goodreads romance. The first one was Book Lovers by Emily Henry. This is another super unpopular opinion. I think a lot of people really, really love this book. And I went into it thinking it was a romance, and it's not a romance. It's a book about two sisters and, like, going to the small town. And, like, it's really about the sisters forming a better relationship and friendship with each other, and that happens to have a romance in the background. I've talked before about what makes a romance versus what makes it a contemporary or women's fiction. I don't like the word women's fiction. Contemporary lit fic type thing. If the romance is the central plot, like you don't have a story without the romance, then it's a romance. But if you still have a cohesive story without a romance, then it's lit fic. It's not a romance. That's just my opinion. I'll link a video up above and down below where I talk about that in depth, about what is and isn't a romance. The other one that I already talked about was Things We Never Got Over by Lucy Score. This was actually a really fun read for a lot, like most of the book. I read it very fast. It is almost a 600-page book that I read in 2.5 days, I think. I read a lot of it, like, on a plane. I had a lot of fun with, like, probably the first 65% of it, but at that point, it kind of started going a little off the rails, a little crazy. I think we probably had one too many subplots in there, because a romance book doesn't need to be 600 pages long. This is about a woman who runs away from her own wedding, and then goes to this, like, little tiny town where her sister is supposedly at, and her sister's like bad news bears. Ends up stealing her car, breaking into her hotel room, like steals money, and leaves her niece, like the sister's daughter, the main character's niece. There we go. And so the main character, like, has to basically stay in this town, is like getting free rent from one of the older ladies in the town. And she obviously has to start a romance with, like, the head guy of the town. He's not really the mayor, but he's, like, a very established character in the town. This had a lot of, like, Gilmore Girls feel to it. Very Grumpy Sunshine. And like I said, a lot of the book I really, really liked. I think there was just one too many subplots in there. And we could have had it probably, like, 100 pages less. It was a little bit repetitive. At, like, from, like, 65 to 80% of the way through the book, I feel like was, like, really repetitive and kind of boring. I think that if you like Colleen Hoover, like that type of book, you'll really like this book. I also gave 3 stars to the graphic novel Battle Royale. This book was really cute. The art style, very adorable. It kind of has the like Chef's Kiss, not the novel, but the graphic novel Chef's Kiss. That kind of art style, kind of cutesy. It's about these 2 kids that go, I think, to London from Canada. They go to London and they go into this cooking show. It's an interesting concept. It's not very well executed or well thought out, but it was cute. There were some things that just happened, like, really fast. Like, we were building, and then it was like, oh, we're done. So, the pacing definitely needed some help with it, but it was cute. It was a good time. I read it a day. Then we have We Need to Do Something by Max Booth III. This is the weirdest book I've ever read. Not gonna lie. This book is about a family that has to go into the bathroom during a tornado warning and ends up staying there for days. It's a very short novel, so I can't really tell you about it, but, like, let's just say things descend into chaos very quickly. It becomes kind of like supernatural fever dream type, like, cult, witchy. I can't really pinpoint what this book is, honestly. Like, this book is weird. There's definitely, like, this closed room aspect of it. There's only 4 characters plus, like, another character that's named but never speaks a word. But there's, the mom, the dad, the brother, and the sister. And, like, that's it. That is the characters. And so you have this, like, very claustrophobic feel the entire time. This was a weird ride. I read it for Summerween. I'll link that blog up above as well. My last 3-star read was Light from Uncommon Stars by Rika Aoki. This is the group book for the Avengers Initiative Reading Challenge. So I will link the live show that we talked about this in detail. I believe it was on Bree's channel, if I remember correctly. This is a sci-fi fantasy kind of genre bending, but again, it had one too many elements. That is the theme of this video, this wrap up this month. One too many things. So it is about this violinist who makes a deal with the devil to, like, sell the devil these souls. So she's, like, mentoring these young violinists. But then there's also aliens. We only needed one of those. Honestly, I would have been perfectly happy with this older lesbian, violin teacher mentoring this young trans student. That would have been a great book, but then we have to throw in the devil and we have to throw in aliens. It was a weird time. I'll link everything down below because I don't want to give spoilers, but this one was kind of a miss for me, which is really upsetting because I really had high hopes for it. Moving on to my 3.5 books. I had 2 of them. One of them I talked about in my Goodreads romance video, and that was Dating Dr. Dill by Nisha Sharma. I think that the majority of this book was fantastic. I loved the extended family. The aunties were just so much fun. The family dynamic and the conversations about arranged marriages versus love marriages were really interesting. My biggest problem with this is that it really leaned heavily into the miscommunication trope, and honestly, if the characters would have just sat down and had a conversation, the last third of the book probably wouldn't have needed to happen. But it was a really fun book, and I had a good time listening to it. The next one was The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. This I was given a review copy for, so thank you so much for that. And this is about a woman who could see ghosts and also had a relationship with a ghost. However, she couldn't touch him, so that was a little bit more realistic in the sense of ghost. I know ghosts aren't realistic. Don't worry about it, okay? This book really dealt heavily with grief, and she had to go back to her hometown to plan her father's funeral, and it was also really weirdly nostalgic because I used to live above a funeral home when I was in college. Fun fact about me. So it was weird, when they were talking about funeral homes and things like that, because I did live in one for a couple of years. Overall, I really enjoyed this book. I think that this is one of those books where the author did a really good job transitioning from YA to adult. I've read a lot of books recently from YA authors that tried to transition into adult books and did not do it well, and I think Ashley did a pretty good job. There were some conversations that felt a little bit juvenile, but overall I think the characters felt like adults. They had adult conversations, they had adult feelings, that kind of thing, and the ending was a little bit of a twist, so I appreciated that. Wasn't necessarily where I would have gone with the story, but I can appreciate it nonetheless. Moving on to my 4-star reads. The first one I read for Summerween, and that was A Flicker in the Dark by Stacy Willingham. This is about a woman who is a therapist. Her father was put away for life, I think, because he confessed to the crime of killing girls or kidnapping them. And it's happening again. So it's definitely this repeat trope thing, and she's trying to figure out why, and there was definitely some red herrings that I thought were done really, really well. I did not see the twist coming. I don't tend to guess twists, so it's not necessarily a huge thing that I didn't see it coming. However, it's kind of one of those things that I'm more just upset if I do see it coming, because that means it was really bad because I wasn't even trying. But I think it was really done well, and I really liked the story. There are a lot of characters in this book that all could have had something to do with it. There was definitely one point where the author was trying almost too hard to be this is the character that is, and so then you kind of know it's definitely not, because no thriller is that obvious. So that was a little bit she was trying too hard to steer you in that direction. However, I think that the pacing was really, really good, and this was a very quick read. I was engaged with it from start to finish. My second 4-star read was A Prayer for the Crown Shy by Becky Chambers. This is the second book in the Monk and Robot series. I read A Psalm for the Wild Boat last year, and then read this one this year. These are adorable. This is about a tea monk and a robot who is trying to figure out Earth. They had been essentially turned off for years and years and years, centuries, I think, and now he's trying to learn humanity because he's been woken up. Very, very cute. There's so much queer rep in this. There is a lot of conversation about your place in the planet and how you take care of the planet, and how you interact with other humans and other people and other things around you. Sometimes I think this book might have been tried to do social commentary a little bit too heavy-handed. It was a lot of social commentary in 120 pages, and so I think some of it was a very, very direct, very on the nose instead of being a little bit more nuanced, which is what I kind of like in fantasy. So it was very obvious what Becky was trying to do with this, but it's still adorable. This is really good. I had 2 4.5-star reads. One was a reread. One of them I talked about in my romance video. So we'll talk about the reread first. That's Fantastic Land by Bakkavin. I read this for Summerween. And this one I did learn. Not great physically. It's all done in this like interview kind of like documentary style. And so it's like, it's characters explaining the dialogue, right? And so it's like, well, you know, we were walking through the thing and he said da 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 da. And so because of that, physically reading it, there's not many page breaks. It's like just a wall of page. And so physically reading, not the way to go. And so if you are looking to pick this one up, because this one definitely got a resurgence on BookTube after Hyde came out and was not good. This one was like if you want a spooky amusement park, this is where you should read. I highly recommend the audiobook. The audiobook for this book is fantastic. It's on Audible Plus, so if you have Audible Plus, you don't have to use a credit for it. It's just like included in your subscription. That's the way to read this book. Don't read it physically. It's a good book. I love it. It's very spooky. It's kind of slashery. I had a good time. And then my second 4.5-star read was Hook, Line, and Sinker by Tessa Bailey. This is the second book in the Bellinger Sisters series. This is about Hannah and Fox, 2 of the side characters in It Happened One Summer. And I thoroughly enjoyed this book. It's definitely more slow burn than anything Tessa Bailey has ever written before. The smut is still like on point. Fire. However, it's definitely more slow burn. You don't get like, immediately jump into bed vibes. This is a friends to lovers romance, which is one of my favorite tropes. Probably my favorite trope in romance, if we had to like really rank them, which could be a video idea. If you want it, I could rank romance tropes. That would be a fun thing. But anyway, friends to lovers, God tier. This was just so good. It hit all the buttons for me, right? It also has some really good conversations about toxic masculinity. Fox has just like from a child has been the playboy. His dad was always trying to get the girls, that kind of thing. And so even like in elementary school, teachers and his mom were always just assuming that he would also be like that. He would, have a different girl every week. And so he just kind of like got pigeonholed into that, even though he wanted a real and meaningful relationship. He felt like he had this persona that he had to play based on things that he was told as a kid. And that's just really sad. And this one was so good. I highly recommend it. If you liked It Happened One Summer, this is definitely on the same kind of vibe as that. Still has that like small town feel to it. But I know that a lot of people didn't like it quite as much as It Happened One Summer, but I definitely think it's the better of the two. I had 3 5-star reads this month, and I'm so happy. The first one I'm going to talk about is Written in the Stars by Alexandra Bellapierre. This was my scavenger hunt book, and then I read it last weekend, I think, something like that. I don't remember. This is a sapphic kind of Pride and Prejudice reimagining. It's set in Seattle, which is one of my favorite places in the country. It is this like quirky, funny, sunshine astrologist, or like she writes horoscopes and things like that, and then an accountant, something like that. I can't remember. An actuary, I don't know, works with numbers, does math, finance stuff. So like 2 polar opposites. They don't feel like they should get along, but they end up in this like fake dating relationship to like kind of appease some friends and family, trying to be like, yeah, see, I can have a serious relationship, please stop bugging me. And then obviously they fall in love. And like fake dating, another god tier trope. Love it so much. These characters were adorable. I related to both of them in different aspects. And I had a really, really good time with this book. Then I am definitely jumping on the hype train with this one, and Finley Donovan is Killing It by Elle Cosimano. I immediately went out and bought the sequel to this after reading this. Have I read it yet? No, but this was so much fun. This definitely has Only Murders in the Building vibes. Really, really, like, it's one of my favorite shows right now, and this kind of has a very similar vibe. Essentially, the main character is a single mom, a divorcee, and she meets at a Panera with, I think, her editor, talking about her newest book idea, and it's essentially like this murder mystery where this woman kills her husband, and a woman overhears her and mistakes her for a hitman, hands her like $10,000 and says, my husband's a terrible person, please take care of it. thinking that like she killed people for a living, not wrote about killing people for a living. And then she ends up in, like, you know, a whole world of hurt. Her and her friend end up, like, on these crazy, crazy shenanigans. Her friend is just absolutely hilarious. I'll definitely be picking up the sequel as soon as I can. But yeah, I had a good time reading this. I buddy read it with Aoife from Pretty Purple Polka Dots. I'll link her down below. This was a good time. And lastly, my favorite book of the month. I did gush about this book in my romance video, and that is The Wedding Crasher by Mia Sosa. This is another book that had like a really fun extended family. The family is Brazilian. It was a lot of fun. They talk about Brazilian food and like the beaches, and like it just made me miss Brazil. It made me miss the food. This woman is roped into helping coordinate this like random person's wedding, right? She doesn't know who this person is, and she overhears the bride and the bride's friend talking, and she like confesses her love to her friend instead of the groom before the wedding. And so then at the ceremony, when, you know, they say like, does anyone oppose? She decides, yeah, I do. Actually, you need to know this. Your bride-to-be loves another dude. And turns out it wasn't like really a love marriage, but it does end. But then he needs this like fake fiance, fake girlfriend, so that he can get a promotion at work. This client like is really big family man and wants to see, like, he doesn't want a bachelor as his lawyer. He wants somebody who's like secure. Essentially, he calls her up and says, look, you ruined my wedding. We're fake dating now. That's a thing we're doing. And it goes from there. And obviously they develop feelings. And this was such a good time. This was so good. It was so much fun. I immediately picked up her other book, The Worst Best Man, after reading that. So this is definitely one of those authors that I had never read before, but I'm so excited to now like go get all of her backlist books. So those are the books that I read in the month of July. Tell me down below what your favorite book of the month was. And if you're not feeling chatty, you can do wedding bells or a wedding cake for The Wedding Crasher. Some sort of emoji down below. That's all I have for you today. If you're new here and you have not yet subscribed, there's a little red button that you can do so down below the video. And all of the other links to my social media will be in the description below if you'd like to be my friend on any other platform. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.